The calisthenics that we see on social media doesn't reflect how training is in real life. What are the differences?
It doesn't really sell it that well, but how tedious calisthenics actually is, because when it comes down to the training of calisthenics, the glory behind doing certain skills or moves, or like basically the kind of things that you would, what popularizes it, I guess, like even when it comes to the muscle ups, when you see these guys doing like really cool muscle ups or like just simple looking moves, a lot of people don't pay attention to the very tedious, meticulous work that needs to go behind it, like the build-up of the skills, and the fact that a lot of it doesn't even look that great. The fact that there's conditioning work involved, which is not really shown, or at least appreciated, because I feel like a lot of people go through that beginning phase that you see, but they kind of jump straight into the, oh, I can do a handstand now, bam, and then that's all they do. They avoid all the work prior to that, when it's kind of interesting, because if you look at any other sport, they do regress back into the most basic skills quite frequently. You know what I mean? Like if you look at, for example, a gymnast, they will go and start using, the ring apparatus that they have to, like the slidey machine.
The dream machine, how it has the different notches for the leverage.
Exactly. I really doubt that they spend all day on the rings. Even if they can, they do a bunch of things on the ring. It just doesn't make sense to the body to put it under that heavy load, which is like that primary skill set constantly, because it's just not going to translate well. The wear and tear is there. So I think a lot of people don't see or they don't see, and also they don't appreciate the smaller, less intensive side of calisthenics, almost like just doing basic holds, push-ups, working on your form. Even if doing 10 push-ups at a very slow tempo, it's not exactly the most interesting thing in the world, but if you're doing it incredibly correctly with intention of, no, I want to increase my plant strength, I'm going to really do it as slow as possible so I know how to activate my lats when I'm, pushing up so that I don't lose form, all that kind of stuff. That's something that I think that is not seen on social media.
No. And we don't do that in our gym training either. It's not as if you go in every workout, do your 1RM on a bench press, squat, or deadlift, but you get into calisthenics and you try the hardest version of your muscle up, front lever, and planche. That's testing. That's not training.
Yeah, and I think there's this like distinct difference between understanding what is testing, because I can say this myself, at one point, when you are sort of like hooked into that social media world, there is this weird sort of dissonance between training for yourself and training for content, especially in calisthenics, because in calisthenics it's not just really about, I'm not saying that there's excuses to do things differently in like bodybuilding or powerlifting, but the content of powerlifting, if you were to do like deload content, or if you're a bodybuilder and you were to sort of focus more on the volume side of things, so something that isn't so intensive to the body, like not your peak, if you will, that's acceptable content. You know what I mean? That's still cool. But in Cali, you train every day to be able to make that post. So there are training sessions where you just do the fucking skill. You know what I mean? You spend the whole video, the whole training session is you just trying to get that one workout in. So essentially you're doing a 1 rep max for like 45 minutes straight. It kind of isn't clever.
No, it's not as glamorous as saying, I worked on the same static hold duration as I did last week. It felt a bit easier. Or I added 1 second to my advanced tuck planche instead of just trying to beast out onto the final thing I can possibly do.
And you're always just trying to, like, especially with the pressures that you have in social media, you're just trying to like one up yourself every single time. And even if you have that sort of rationality behind it where you're like, yeah, I know I did actually hold it the same amount of time, but it was less painful. You know what I mean? It was a lot easier on my body. I felt better. That's a statistic and empirical improvement by all stretch of imagination. But if no one understands that, there's no views, there's no good job, there's nothing like that. So it becomes one of these things where it's like, no, I got to do more than that.
And that flows on to the person who just uses social media to learn about calisthenics, get motivated, because it seems as if everyone's progressing faster than they are, but you're seeing the highlights.
Exactly. I still remember, like, back in the day, when I was learning everything, one of the people that was sort of a big, uh, I guess you can call him a pioneer in the very beginning of his career. Then he switched over when he started working with Connor, which is Ido Portal. I remember in the very beginning of Ido's sort of like rise to fame when he was really going on about calisthenics, and he was sort of known for this like one-handed handstand thing. Do you remember that?
Yep, he definitely brought that into the generalist culture.
So I remember when he was talking about it, that he specifically said that he had students that learned it instantly compared to him. He's like, no, I spent years trying to learn how to do this. And then he had other people that were learning it instantly. I think there's also when I talk about the dissonance as well, there's definitely a lack of understanding between people just being able to do things faster.
Yeah, there's not enough spoken about your genetic predisposition for pulling versus pushing, how your anthropometry with your limb lengths affects your strength. All this stuff really makes a difference.
And it's interesting because like I also feel like because of pride, not many people are willing to say openly like, no, I'm just generally better at it. Like I didn't do anything. This is my thing. You know what I'm trying to say? Like a lot of people will come out and be like, no, it's the hard work, it's this, that, the other. And it'd be like, bro, you can do handstand push-ups like they are nothing, but you can't hold a front lever. Like just say that you're push strong. You know what I mean? Like this is your weak point, this, that, the other, because then you'll have like a bunch of expectations, if you will. Sort of a lot of people being like, that's how it is. You know, that's how fast I should be able to get that move. And if I'm not getting it that much, then I need to overtrain it. You know what I mean? I need to keep going, keep going, keep going. Because if he got it just by doing planches or handstands, then I can get it by just doing that. And it's like,
So real training is actually more genetically influenced as well as it's slower than what it seems on social media.
there's a great degree of pride and ego when it comes to all these exposés of calisthenic moves and whatnot when it comes to Instagram because or YouTube or whatever because I mean it goes down to freestyle even. You might have certain people that are just gifted at freestyle because they have faster reaction rates. I know for a fact that I'm one of those people where it's like if I let go of the bar, my whole body freezes. You know what I mean? Like my mind just cannot accept letting go of the bar. Whereas at the same time, as long as I'm holding on to something, I can be on a high-rise building, you know, standing on the edge or whatever it is because I'm holding on to something. It's a different kind of mentality. So it could be also be said in freestyle that there's some people that are just gifted at dynamic movements, you know, and there's no sort of there isn't any focus point on the people that are not good at it. So you don't really see what I was saying in the beginning, the more boring, tedious side of things, because someone who isn't good at something has to go through incredibly difficult ways to get through that one move. You know what I mean? They have to do the most boring thing over and over again. And then eventually they can start posting, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, I can do the other.
What's your recommendation? Should we lean into things that we're naturally gifted at, or should we strive for things that come slower? Is it a matter of finding what means most to us? It can be confusing.
You have to do both. You know, if you just focus on something that you're bad at, then that will actually affect your ability to progress to a certain degree. Because if you're never progressing, then your motivation to actually go forward and continue doing something is never going to be there. You know, like you're just grinding away and you never see any progress whatsoever. You just kind of get to this point where it's like, okay, but what do I do? Whereas if you are doing things where you are progressing quickly and you do feel like you're getting the results from the work that you're putting in, regardless of whether or not it's something that you're good at, it still keeps you going in the mix because it's a bit of a yin and yang situation. It's kind of telling yourself, yes, I need to work on this, but at least I have that.
That was really well said. And the other thing is having that level of realistic rate of progress is important. And you got to, sounds so cliche, but you've got to celebrate those small wins. You're not just going to unlock the end stage skill straight away. It's going to be those few seconds, that gradual increase of your body posture in whatever skill that you're doing. And just reflecting on your own journey is something that you have to constantly come back to amidst, looking on social media for inspiration. Use it, enjoy it, get pushed by it, but don't let it consume you or be toxic. Always refer to yourself, celebrating
It's
it.
actually very interesting that you should say that, because at the same time, I feel like it's harder these days to get to that, or at least to do that. I think that's definitely something that we need to sort of, at least social media, like all these fitness influencers and whatnot, the ones who, I guess you could call it the OGs of the scene, because they've sort of been around before there was this like, no, this is before gym inflation.
Gym inflation.
Before gym inflation happened, I guess you can have these, a lot of OGs would definitely say that there's time, you know what I mean? Like there's no rush. So what happens is, I've seen this with clients, I've seen this with friends, because there is that one thing that they do progress well at, the frustration of not progressing fast enough compared to other people, they then focus primarily on that one thing.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's also needing to understand, it's sort of teaching the message of that you need to have good with the bad. Like you need to also have failure with the success, because if you're only seeking the success and the one thing that you're good at, then there's never going to be that moment of, why am I not progressing in these other moves? Well, maybe it's because you've just been overtraining that one plane of motion for so long now, because it's the only thing that makes you feel like you're doing well, that you now have a bunch of compensations happening in your body. You're priming your body to have certain injuries as well. Like that's another thing that we'll talk about later. But like the idea of, if you just train one skill, that your body isn't going to actually eventually get injured from doing that is kind of funny to me, because like the amount of people I now see in Cali coming up and be like, man, I got these like lower back issues and whatnot. And I'm like, you do planks, right? Yeah. Okay. You know what I mean? Like I started to notice these trends, but yeah, I definitely say that what you just said, like it's harder to do that, like it's much harder these days to be able to be like, I need the realistic level. I need that realistic sort of gauge of where I am. I don't know. It's a very difficult thing to internalize your training these days.
I agree. And the price of pushing too hard and not listening to your body is injury, pain. You've got extensive experience with this, Mike. I'd just love for you just to spit some absolute wisdom on the audience, because calisthenics, for the most part, is a young man's game. A lot of people get into it, teens, and they just train hard all the time. What have you learned through the various injuries that you've had?
Depends on which one. It depends on which one. I've got one sort of, I guess you could say the nucleus of a lot of my issues. It stems from my lower back. Back in the day when I was playing rugby, no pun intended, I herniated my back quite badly, and it was one of those things. I was 15 years old at this point. Like, well, a few things that I learned from it. The first one being that I definitely understood that the body is an incredibly fragile yet incredibly tough machine. Like people don't really value how fragile it is, because there's a lot of reckless behavior and whatnot, but they also don't appreciate just how tough it is, and that even when it is broken, it will find a way to always get something done, whether it not be a good like movement or a good compensation. Body doesn't care. It's to be able to do what your mind is telling it to do. So that's when you have people developing issues on another side because they have an injury that they never dealt with and their body compensates. That's what I mean. The body is a very fascinatingly adaptive machine that we don't really appreciate how adaptive it is. There are extreme limits that which you can go, but also appreciating that if you don't let the body recover, and it's deeper than just saying, okay, I'm not going to train. I learned that recovery is a much deeper thing than just, okay, I'm going to not train today, I'm going to eat more today, I'm going to drink today. No, recovery in itself is definitely something that is also mental, and it's something that I feel like a lot of people don't understand that that's also the time that you really need to take a step back and kind of like appreciate what you've done for that period of time. Because if you're trying to recover, it's not just a physical recovery, it's a mental recovery. And I never really gave myself that time because it was always, every time I trained, it was like, I've got to go harder, I've got to go harder, I've got to go harder. It hurts. Okay, cool. I just train around it. I keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. And not realizing that had I just said, you're doing pretty good, man, give yourself a bit of a break, a good break, and you can go back and do it again. Because there was always this rush in my head to keep moving forward. And I didn't realize that the time that I actually had available to me was a lot more than I thought. That's it. That's definitely something that my injuries taught me, is like I could have definitely have avoided rushing my body so much.
And what's really challenging, if you're passionate, you love calisthenics, you're itching to train every single time, the thought of taking days off is harder than actually going and training consistently for months and months on end. You need to treat yourself like you would treat a friend, because left to our own devices, we'll have that inner self-talk. Could have worked harder, could have done more, I'll try harder next time. Whereas if a friend came up to you and said exactly your plan, what you're doing, you would look at it with a more objective, rational lens and say, don't feel insecure, just taking a little step back to step forward, rest, recover, recuperate. You'll come back bigger, stronger, more motivated, and have longevity. But it's so difficult to do that ourselves.
It is ironically one of the hardest things in the world, because it just to be able to take that one step back and just be like, because even when you say it, just as you're saying, I know a lot of people listening would just be like, you know what, I've never really told myself that way.
You almost have to consciously think it, because unless you say it.
Yeah, because just saying it is like, cool, whatever. But if you actually take that role and you're just like, okay, you create a friend, if you will, who is yourself. You know what I mean? Like, even if you have if you have WhatsApp, just start talking to yourself. You know, send yourself messages. Start saying, hey man, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing that. Come back to it the next day and just kind of go, bro, are you dumb?
No chat GBT needed. Just talk to yourself, boys. You're the best teacher.
Yeah, just like, if you really know what you're doing, and for the most part, people do know what they're doing. That's the thing.
Yeah,
You've done all the research, you've done all you know what you're doing. Half of the people that I know that are high level athletes are also coaches. Go figure.
Let me give you a personal example on this topic, Mike, because I'm trying to embody this to, have longevity and make the best progress. Having a training log is so important because it gives you more restraint for people that are type A like us, that are very conscientious, want to push, push, push. Last week or so, I'm just, dragging my feet a bit more, like not as motivated to go work out. I haven't been progressing. Numbers are stagnating, feeling very similar. Starting to feel a little bit more in the joints. Don't usually get that. Very rare for me. Okay, I go, when was the last time I took a deload? 13 weeks ago. So it happens to the best of us, bros. So having this allows you to be more, your best coach and your best friend.
And it doesn't have to be so like black and white, like where I'm going to go to the gym right now, and just like, that's a level of communication where you've already made that sort of established that communication with yourself. If, like, for a lot of people that don't know how to or when to have that talk with themselves, like when to actually say, hey man, come on. A good time is if you're like, a lot of people will go to the gym and they'll be like, oh, I feel like shit. And it doesn't matter. Like a bad workout's better than no workout at all. Arguable, actually, very arguable, depending on how you actually feel. Because if you're getting to the gym and you genuinely feel like crap and it genuinely hurts to move, like you're like, this is not the soreness that I'm used to.
No. And you got to be honest with yourself. If this is happening every single week and you're just, I'll skip a workout, I'll go half through the motions, that's not what I'm talking about. If you've been consistent for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, then you're getting these symptoms. It's more a chronic reflection of how you feel as opposed to just some acute, exactly, day-to-day thing.
So it's easy to just like, if you get to that training session, a lot of people from my experience as well with like just talking to friends, even when they get to the gym, they have this like as if it's like this unknown eye watching them, telling them, "You're here. You need to get your workout in. Don't miss it." And it's just like
Yeah.
no one's watching you, dude. Calm the fuck down. If
You're
you
not a
want to go
competitive
home,
athlete. Yeah. We're going to be doing this for
dude, if you want to go
decades.
home because it really hurts and you know that you're not going to have a good workout, or that oh man, if like I can say it definitely happens to me. Like I'll get there and I'll just be like, fuck, my shoulder hurts, and I'll still push it. I'll still go for that workout, and then at the end of it, I'm just like, I could have not done that. Like I could have avoided that. The best time to stop yourself is if you start off that workout, you do your warm up, you do your first set, and it's just like, sorry, buddy, it's not. You had your pre workout. It's just nothing's happening. You know what I mean? Like nothing's happening in your head right now. That is a telltale sign that, hey, dude, it's not your body that's burnt out. It's your central nervous system at this point. You know what I mean? Like it's your whole mind. And even if you go home and you try and recover right now, the likelihood is that your body's still going to be like, bruh, I'm tired, man. Like I need you to zone out. Don't be stressing yourself right now or anything. You know what I mean? Like I need you to actually take a rest. I will give you a gem, especially for the listeners out there, for the bodybuilders out there. And this is one of the things that I sort of try and push when it comes to hybrid training is there are different forms of hybrid training. For me, it is calisthenics and bodybuilding, because by definition, hybrid training is you're taking two or more disciplines and you're sort of combining elements of each to sort of, well, more than anything, to complement the initial discipline, if you will.
The sum is greater than the parts.
Exactly. If you're a Cali athlete, you do bodybuilding in order to address isolation work or deload work. That's sort of the hybrid aspect of bodybuilding for calisthenics. And if you're a bodybuilder, I guess you could say you're a hybrid if you do calisthenics, because it is giving you better proprioception than you would if you were just doing typical bodybuilding work. One of the ones that I like to tell bodybuilders, because there is this whole argument, and what's the best way to work your side delts, and how do you get 3D delts, and la 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 la.
Cable versus dumbbells. Which one's superior? Ooh.
It dawned on me, one of the best ways that I ever had to build the cap side of my, because even with a completely dead shoulder, this is off. This is 1 year of not working shoulder. This is what I have left over.
There's still some striations in those things there. Don't worry.
I found that the most effective, or one of the ways that I really found helped working my medial delt, was any kind of position where you put your shoulder behind your head, but with resistance this way. So if I'm pulling backwards like that, what I found was when I was doing the handstand, whenever I had to balance myself in this position where I'd look through, that was when my medial delts would fire up the most. And honestly, if you try it, just lift your hand up behind your head like this and then push back harder.
Oh yeah, that inner range contraction is
you
nasty.
Just feel it right down the middle of your shoulder.
And what's interesting here is you could say, bodybuilding, hypertrophy, you need the stretch, you need the eccentric to build muscle. Of course, it's a key piece. We're not going to refute that, but where the value of the calisthenics movement, your handstand, it's just that pure time under tension. You can do a handstand workout where you're spending 10 minutes on your hands.
Yeah. And people don't really realize that extent of time on such a fucking small muscle, because it's really not that big of a muscle to be able to maintain all of your body weight for 10 minutes at a time. That's going to give you very strong micro muscles. That's going to give you very strong everything. It's not necessarily going to directly work on that hypertrophy aspect of things, but it's definitely going to aid. And that's also a part of it, because when you have that understanding of like the shoulder, I guess, how it feels, and each head of the shoulder, how it feels, the mechanics around how to work it. You go to the gym, you lift up a dumbbell, you can just manipulate it a little bit. You know what I mean? You can change the position and it will have a drastic effect on your shoulder. And I find it funny because then you look at all these videos nowadays about science-based lifting and all these guys doing like crazy variations and holding this and doing that and limiting this. And you're just like, you don't really need to do that. Like the body has ways of resisting in its own capacity. You don't need to add weights to it.
For people that want to put on size with calisthenics and build muscle, what are your biggest recommendations? Because you have an excellent physique. You're known for having an awesome physique, good muscle size, lean, and aspiring physique that we'd, love to build. How do we do
Thank you. Specifically when it comes to getting size in calisthenics, first of all, I think understanding what's actually happening in general across the board, not just like in the Cali sense of things, but like what you're doing to your body, the resistance training that you're going through. I think understanding that in both bodybuilding and calisthenics before you even go on will make things easier. So a lot of people tend to compartmentalize calisthenics into this they'll pigeonhole it into an area of fitness, which is like, oh, these skinny dudes doing crazy skills. You know what I mean? Like that's what we know as calisthenics on the internet. It's just a bunch of small kids doing crazy skills, and because they're small. And the
Meanwhile,
thing is
you go
that,
to the sets and reps side of calisthenics and you think,
there you go.
wow.
I was about to say, you go to sets and reps and you will find some people that do not make any sense on how big they are. Bro, the tits you find in
those watermelon pecs, they fill out the bras. They're huge. They're milk duds.
I just remember still the videos of like the guys back in the day in the Bronx, where you just see them repping out like 100 push-ups, and you're just like, this dude hasn't touched the bench since he started training. You know what I mean? Like, or if ever. And it's a lot of people don't realize that calisthenics resistance-based training is exactly the same as the stuff you do in the gym. It's resistance-based training, but with a fixed resistance. Done. It's not more complicated than that. You are doing the same thing to your body. You are providing an isometric contraction over and over again until you cause the body to break down. Therefore, you have to then build it back up. People don't realize that the only thing to do there is just to focus on your nutrition. There's nothing different to it. Like if you're someone that does high volume sets and reps and you eat appropriately as if you were just being a bodybuilder, you're going to get bigger. There's no science to it. It's not like you're going to have crazy, 1 rep max strength. No, but you will be definitely developing muscle because it is a byproduct that you have no control over.
And muscle building is one of the least discriminatory forms of adaptation. If you're, as you said, doing the volume, you've got resistance, you're training at a decent proximity to failure, whether it's weights, calisthenics, you'll grow. And I think that where people fall short with calisthenics is they may not be doing enough volume or their intensity is just lacking. I think it's a little bit more clear cut. You get on a bench press, you can fail within that, say, 8 to 12 rep range, just as an example. Whereas with calisthenics, say you're doing push-ups and you get pretty good at them, you just be like, oh, I'll stop at 20. But you could have gone to 30, 40. You've got to go to failure or near it.
I think there seems to be a lack of understanding when it comes to rep ranges just because of like how consistently we're told how they work. You have a lot of people saying, oh, if you go above a certain rep range, and I saw your video recently, like a story, you're just joking around and say, oh, I hit 30, I better.
Yeah, I was doing a collab with a bodybuilder and I was doing some dips and I was just showing him form and stuff like that. And then I got to 30 and I just stopped and made a joke, oh, I better stop now because anything above 30 ceases to be muscle building, pure endurance.
And that's when I think I do appreciate science-based lifting because it would be very obtuse of me as an athlete to not do so. I think a lot of people who reject it are just like, so you're basically saying, I don't believe in science. Like, that's it. Because it is science-based lifting. The first word of it is there for a reason. It's not anecdotal science-based lifting because that would be just bro science. This is the actual attempt at least to understand better what works better. Now, is this set in stone, black and white? I would say very much no. It never has been, because if that's the case, why would there be outliers in training when it comes to certain things? You know, you'll have certain people that have just done better training a certain way.
Just to clarify, for muscle growth with the rep range, the consensus is 5 to 30 reps is more ideal for building muscle. But as we've just spoken about, depending on the resistance, why are calisthenics dudes doing 50 plus reps on an exercise, getting huge, and they're not even sticking within those parameters? So it goes to show we've got to take everything with a grain of salt, and it's all on a spectrum. Sure, once you go plus 30, you're starting to enter more endurance territory and going further from that pure absolute strength range. But for building muscle, there's so many ways to do it.
I think therein lies sort of like the misconception of building muscle and what it means to be strong, because endurance strength and 1 rep max like power doesn't necessarily have anything to do with muscle size. Yes, it can dictate, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with it, in the sense of, obviously, if you're a marathon runner, your body will adapt in the way that you're not going to have as much muscle. But at the same time, these motherfuckers are legs, like they have massive legs. Those are still purely endurance legs, but they're fucking huge. So there's no real correlation between, well, there is, but it doesn't necessarily dictate a certain thing, especially unless you're like trying to reach an elite level of hypertrophy, unless you're trying to be Mr. Olympia, and you don't have to pay attention to that as much. And even then, I do remember Kai Green, for example, coming out and saying, I'm not a weightlifter, I'm a bodybuilder.
Yes, I do remember him saying that. And that was really important at the time.
Very, very high volume work that he does. He focuses very much more on the mind-muscle connection side of things. And then that's when you start to really appreciate stimulus is stimulus. It's what you do with the stimulus that really makes a difference. So with regards to gaining size in calisthenics, I would say that it definitely comes down to whether you're reaching that point of failure. And it will be said that you'll know what it is. Like if you're just starting off and you hit 20 reps and you really struggle for 20, that is failure. Like it doesn't feel as detrimental as not being able to bench 100 and, you know, like really struggling to get that whatever third, fourth rep in it. That's a much more tangible form of failure. But if you're genuinely struggling to finish a rep, regardless of how you feel in 2 minutes time, you've reached failure. Because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to do that exact same rep range within a minute.
Additionally, with calisthenics compounds, they'll take your physique a really far way. But I will say that it tends to bias a lot more of the torso. You got your chest, your back, world class with calisthenics, just using your basics. If you wanted to put that icing on the cake, the finishing touches on your physique, doing more of your arm stuff, maybe some shoulders, would just be a maybe more efficient way to target those muscles instead of just doing more dips, more pull-ups.
Actually, that's a lot of the kids that ask me about like sort of developing a physique when they're based in calisthenics. I actually just tell them you don't need to do much. You just need to add 1 or 2 exercises to what you're already doing, because they're already stimulating and using those, you know, arms, shoulders, forearms. It's already being used on a higher level. They don't need to do that much to actually cause the stimulus for growth in those areas, because at that point they're just sort of overworking it, if you will.
That's a very good point. It's just a slight addition. 1 to 2 exercises, buys, tries, 1 to 2 sets, even 2 sets per thing is going to be plenty.
It's not going to be that much that you need to stimulate, because it is the overall work that they're doing throughout the week. You know, even if you're doing planches throughout the week, you are eccentrically using your bicep in a lot.
This episode is sponsored by FitnessFAQs. Learn how to master calisthenics with the best bodyweight workouts. Use the coupon code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off when shopping at FitnessFAQs. Take advantage of this discount and enjoy the progress. For people doing calisthenics that are afraid of getting injured or they have some pain, what words of wisdom would you give to these people?
I think this is when it gets more into the therapy side of things. First of all, if you've never been injured before, understand that injury hurts. Simple as that. Like I know a lot of people panic when they get injured, and then you look back and you're like, have you ever been injured? And no, They've never been injured. They never dealt with a tendonitis. They never dealt with anything more than, a bit of soreness in their joints or whatever it is. Like, they've actually got a problem where doing this movement hurts. You know what I mean? There isn't anything wrong with that. Like, there's a lot of panic that sets in when you first get an injury or when an injury escalates or whatever the case may be. But the first level of getting an injury, regardless of if you're someone who's been injured their whole life or you've had several or it's your first one, is to understand that it's just like, injury is normal. That's important. No one is perfect. My father told me back when I was playing rugby, one of the more interesting things that he told me back in the day was 90% of the best players in the world never get seen. And he was talking about rugby, and I was like, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, for the most part, 90% of the best athletes in the world will never reach professional level because of injury, because of life. And I thought that was very interesting because it is kind of true, actually. Because I still know, when I play rugby or whatever it is, when you're a kid, there's always that one guy that you just go, holy shit, he's fucking good at this. You know what I mean? There's always that one dude who's really, really good at whatever sport you do. And the chances of him becoming a pro are pretty low. Because life will get in the way, he'll get injured and get demotivated or whatever the case may be. But like most of the higher level athletes people who could be a high level athlete will get injured. And it starts off from something as simple as a basic level injury. You're done. You know what I mean? Secondly, I would definitely say the next level after that is if you're someone who's more experienced in injury and you have an injury it is bothering you and you want to keep going, try your best to figure out why you got injured, okay? Because it could be not because of a direct acute injury. It could be because of lack of strength in a certain area. So a lot of people will have golfer's elbow or tennis's elbow, whatever that may be, and they're not actually addressing forearm strength. They're not actually addressing certain areas of strength in their arm, which would cause them to not overwork that injury. So first understand, have you got an acute injury or is this something that is just being overworked? Because if it's being overworked, you can take a step back, you can work on that minor muscle area, and you can eventually find that the injury will not go away, but it won't bother you so much. And the last level of injury would be, and this is where it gets therapeutical. So injury is more than anything something that on a personal level, when I get injured, I already think about the fact, I think I've already overcome the injury. As silly as that sounds. So as I get injured, I've already mentally overcome the injury. I've already recovered from it. The fact that it's there means nothing to me because I've already started thinking, well, more to the point, I'm not letting it eat away at my inner monologue already. I've already overcome that small bump in the road. So say, for example, I'm training. Exactly. I've accepted it instantly. It's there. Cool. I'm not going to do anything. Well, I'm not going to change it. I can't go and change the injury that I just had. And in some cases where it becomes, like in mine, a permanent injury, the last level, and this is the one message that I definitely wanted to get across because there are definitely people out there that have permanent injuries. Like, permanent injury is something that is very easy to come across, especially nowadays when the level of sports is so high. We got super high level gymnastic moves being standardized as like aspects of strength. It's 50 years ago, only specific people could do a planche. And now it's, or specific people could do a one-handed handstand. Now it's like a basic requirement for certain people that do certain sports. And, it sounds really harsh to say this, but as I said, 90% of those people, 80-90% of those people are going to come into an injury that will stop them from being able to really exceed in that sport. In some cases, it's permanent. In some cases, you might tear your labrum. In some cases, you might, cause nerve damage, herniate your back.
A biceps tear where your strength is never the same, a pec tear as well.
And I know mentally, those injuries are the ones that cause the greatest degree of stress because there's always this connotation of you can recover. You know, we see all these images on and all these videos and all these motivational quotes and whatnot. It's all about, you know, you will eventually, it's about enduring, and then eventually it'll all be okay. And it's just the idea of eventually things will go back to normal. And that's just not the fucking
You know
case.
what's happening there as well, Mike, is I hear that same narrative on any injury post. It's always, hey man, dust yourself up. You'll come back bigger, better, and stronger. But what happens if you don't? What happens in life? This is a bit morbid as well, but death happens. That's final. Sometimes the same thing happens with injury too.
Certain bits of, I guess, stoicism involved in that you kind of have to say, not everything is going to be some kind of like Disney story. You know, it's just like, it is what it is. This is all part of the process, if you will. I find personally when it gets to that extent where you don't know really how to, like, you've gone through all the recovery processes, and you've reached that one final point in your head where you're just like, I'm not recovering. I'm not getting better. It's not fucking happening. Why isn't this happening? And that constant why, that just causes such a huge degree of internal stress that it'll just stop you from wanting to pursue that one aspect. And I tell this to a lot of people. It's I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's something I saw a year back or a few years back, and it gave me quite a bit of resolve in the situation. See, I think with especially social media, a lot of people scour it. They doom scroll to a certain degree in order to try and find a bit of a purpose in why they do what they do. You know, an athlete is trying to find a competition. An artist is trying to find inspiration. A musician is trying to find whatever the case may be. But it's this constant sort of trying to find their purpose, trying to find where their niche is, trying to see where they're going to make their mark in the world, if you will. And it's kind of sugar-coated into this sort of, it needs to be beautiful. You know, it needs to be one of these like happy Disney style stories. And what people don't realize is that narrative has happened throughout history, good and bad, in the sense of something bad had to happen to someone for people to benefit, or something negative positively affected other people. And a good way I have of rationalizing that sort of negative state of mind, or that one area of thinking that could possibly cause a consistent downgrade of your mental state, you know, is stop fighting it and thinking that you've been fucked over. Stop thinking that it's a curse. Stop thinking that he did it, God did this to me, and like, stop victimizing. It's much better to look at it as if that is the destiny that you have. Yours isn't a destiny that is clouded in gold. Yours, not the destiny is not one to be the number one athlete, or the number one this, or the strongest guy, or whatever it is. But just because you have in the case of an injury, so say for example, I'll take an actual example of a person, okay? Christoph, okay? The world champion in freestyle. He's currently dealing with a pretty intense back injury. I know this because I talk with him quite a bit about it. And he's using, or not using, but because of how he's talking about it and how he's mentally dealing with this injury, in that he's sort of like, I might not ever be the world champion ever again, but I will not stop trying to be strong. He's accepting the fact that he will never be that, right? That's accepting, but that's also saying, I'm going to make sure that everyone finds this sort of this source of motivation from my pain. And that's something that I've done throughout my life. I've kind of said, okay, maybe my destiny is not one to show everyone how great I am, but it is one to show people how great they can be.
I'd say, despite in your mind you thought that you were going to be destined to be number one, world's best, top of the mountain, I'd almost argue that your current position is so much more relatable to the average person, because most of us aren't the world's best. Like, just by pure statistics alone, like, we're pretty average, and that's not something to be upset about. It's dealing with the cards we've been dealt, not trying, but not being upset that you're not the best.
I always try and find analogies of this so that people can understand. So video games for me is something that's pretty easy to use, because, you know, it's very easy to create a character. It's very easy to objectively look at your video game character and see what's going on. All that's happened is that you chose, because it is, in the end of the day, for the most part, you chose the wrong thing, and this is now the cards that you have to deal with. You chose the wrong option. Now you don't have +7 in this particular stat. You know what I mean? You got -1, but your -1 means that you now have another skill. Okay, cool. Now you have to show everyone else that skill. But in terms of how it applies to everything else, it's not necessarily just sport. That's the aspect of it that people get focused on. You know, it's like, I have to show athletes, and it's like, no, dude, if you're going through suffering, there isn't a single aspect of life that you have to be very, very off as a human being to see someone else going through suffering and really fighting that destiny and really, you know, saying, no, this is not going to overcome me. You have to be completely sort of not there as a human being to not appreciate that and not find it as something to be a source of motivation, because it's just like, it does help. It gives you perspective. And so for a lot of people out there, if they think that, yeah, but my injury means nothing, or my ability to keep going on means nothing, it's like, no, dude, honestly, your mum could find this motivational. You know what I mean? She could see you going through this and just be like, I'm proud of him because he's not giving up, you know? And I like to summarize it, like, especially the video game thing. My best way of summarizing it is, at the end of the day, it's like everyone is the main character of their own story. Like, this whole main character bullshit is like, bro, you are the main character of your own story. How can you not be? It's your story. But you're never the main character of other people's story. Like, that is just not how it works. You're not the main character in another person's story, because if you go into an online video game, you're never going to be their character. They're always going to be their character. The only thing that you can do, especially when dealing with all these mental struggles, is realize that this is the story that you play that makes you the best side character in their stories.
Yeah. And what this can really highlight, if you're in a position where you do get injured, or perhaps even if you never aspire to be as strong as you once were, maybe you give up a planche, maybe you give up peak performance in a front lever or your weighted calisthenics stuff, it opens up freedom and mental headspace to direct your energy elsewhere. And it sounds cliche once again, but if you were balls deep in your program with a healthy body, you wouldn't have that perspective on how you could operate differently.
Yeah, and especially now, when you're reaching a point where a lot of athletes, or a lot of people that have sort of, they've really gone in balls deep to this athletic life, because it is a bit of a weird situation that we're in, really, because we have a bunch of people who are training at elite level.
It's a big sacrifice to reach the top level.
Yeah, everyone's training at this super elite level, but then you look and you're like, but are you competing? And they're like, no. I'm just doing this because everyone else does this. This is like the general level. And to be able to actually also, it also enables people to start thinking about what to do next. I have a big fear that the fitness bubble, the inflation, the bubble that we're reaching right now, the popping point is when a certain generation gets to a point where they go, yeah, but what do we do now? You know, when their careers as an athlete reaches that extent, what do they do if they've never thought about things outside of that? And it sounds horrible to say this, but it's fucking life at this point. You know what I mean? Like, to say you will reach a point where you have to think about something else, and if you've never given it any thought.
None of us are immune to this too. The people that have reached the top getting gold medals, eventually you're going to be too old to compete. Eventually, the top NBA players, LeBron James, will someday retire. Everyone has to have this reality.
They're fortunate enough; they'll show up on like ESPN. You know what I mean? They'll be a TV host. They've got a bit of a personality, but like When most of these guys retire, what are they doing? We don't know. For the most part, I can say for the most part, I don't know what half of the rugby players I grew up watching are doing right now. But it is that interesting kind of like inner conversation that you have where it's just like, okay, cool. Instead of obsessing over becoming the best athlete, how am I really going to be able to provide to everyone around me? Because that, at the end of the day, is the biggest goal that any athlete should have is like, how am I going to, A, reach the top of my own level? But when I've reached the top of my own level, how can I then transmit everything I've done to other people, provide to everyone else?
Yeah, the teaching is so important when you've got this level of knowledge. And now that you're in this position, Mike, with the cards you've been dealt with your body and, you know, all the peaks you've had with huge calisthenic strength and, you know, now dealing with this new reality, what does training look like to you moving forward for life?
Honestly, it's an unknown. It's a bit of an unknown right now because despite me wanting it to be the case or not, a few of the things that I'm dealing with are degenerative. Just, it is what it is, you know. Once one of your discs in your spine is compromised, Edgerson, you know, deterioration starts happening. Over the years, it's just going to wear. Like, I could have lived the healthiest life possible, but I would have had to deal with my back later down the line. You know that as being a physio before, that's just how it is, right? It's got to the point where I don't actually know as far as my training. As it is right now, I could definitely say I'm mastering body mechanics because you really, really have to almost get creative when it comes to how to effectively use certain muscles without using other muscles and not contributing or like compensating with X, Y, and Z. Even a simple flat check.
Finding an overhead press that suits your shoulders instead of just a handstand push-up or a dip.
Exactly. It's one of these weird moments where I guess you could say I've gone back to rookie stages, but I don't really have anything against it because at the same time, it's giving me this whole different perspective on how to effectively work anything, really.
I think that beginner mindset, even if you're not injured, easier said than done. It's like being grateful for your body for what it can do. But if you have that at the forefront of your mind, that you're never done learning, even though you're in this position of having these.
You want to? Okay, so I have to interrupt you right now. Do you know what my tattoo on my side says? Is the first time it's actually been applicable. So I have a tattoo here on my ribcage. Sorry.
Yeah, what does it say?
In the mind of a beginner, there are many possibilities. In the mind of the expert, there are few.
We did not coordinate this, guys. This is just my superior podcast listening skills to extract this from him.
I never tell anyone what that tattoo says. They just say, all right, some text written on his side. But that's actually what it says. It's the second tattoo I ever got because I'm a firm believer of that.
I think you embodying that as a value for life has clearly shown how you've been able to overcome this straight up just really crap situation, man. You would not wish dealing with injury on anyone, but I think that what you've gleaned from it, if people are willing to listen.
I know a lot of people give me shtick for this like anime thing because, you know, Mike was saying the anime thing. And it's just like, I've always been someone who tries to look for the deepest symbolism behind art. Because in the end of the day, you know, these guys are artists, they're storytellers. They're always trying to tell you something. It's not just like some cool story or whatever the case may be, right? And especially when it comes to like this anime mentality with regards to injury specifically, I like to think of it as like, so if you look at these main characters in all these shows, they all have this like very common trait, which is they never ever reject the problems or the bad things that they've done to themselves. In fact, they use it as like a ironic source of inspiration, you know? Like, how many times, I don't know if you watch anime, but how many times have you got like the bad dude and he's just had the absolute the good guy, the main character will have the absolute shit beaten out of him by some guy, right? And he's just beaten and bruised and he stands up and that motherfucker will start laughing. And he'll just go, yeah, I know, I'm a complete fuck up. But, and then he goes and proceeds to completely smack down on this guy because it's just like, you really think that you're going to play mind games with me? Like, do you really think I'm going to let something so small deteriorate what's going on in my head? And I always try and find the symbolism behind that, because in the end of the day, it's like, yeah, that's going to happen a lot. You know, like it might seem a stupid reference point, but you know, it's something as simple as being able to smile off an injury, or like being able to laugh at pain almost, because I can laugh at it. You know, you can say you're in a fucked up situation and be like, fuck yeah, I am. You know what I mean?
Mike, there's a term called Saiyan Pride that's been associated with you. What does this mean?
Okay, so Saiyan Pride is something that it's always existed. It's a very popular trait in Dragon Ball. If you know about Dragon Ball Z, you'll know it's something Vegeta says quite a bit. Ah, my Saiyan Pride. Like I said, I find a lot of symbolism in anime. It's just what I do. And for me, there's one scene where Vegeta is Majin Vegeta comes up. Do you remember Majin Vegeta, the one with the M on his head? Right. So the famous scene is, you may have my mind and you may have my body, but one thing you will never take is my pride. Ah, and then he screams out, right? So for me, I was going through a really rough patch at that time, like pretty rough. This is just before my first back operation, which complete shit show because of the NHS, just pumped me full of medication at that time. And I remember seeing that in like one of these OG AMV videos, you know, that back in the day, those motivational
Where it's to
AMVs,
the
like
music,
the good stuff, the good stuff. I remember hearing that, and for whatever reason, my brain just immediately said, okay, you may have my body, my injuries, you may have my mind, the almost induced addictions that I was being put under, but you will never have my pride. And that was when I was in pain and drugged up, and I would still drag myself to the gym. And that was the big thing for me. And that's why a lot of people, when they say pride and they think of it as a sin, as a thing, and I'm like, maybe human pride. You want to think of human pride is ugly. That's why I like to think of Saiyan Pride, because Saiyan Pride is basically, you can never stop me from thinking, like, you're never going to stop me from wanting to be better. No matter what you think you can do, you're never going to chain me down, because in the end of the day, I have my pride. Because through the drugs, through the injury, through all these things, it's very easy to want to give up. But then you look and you go, my pride won't accept that.
It's the anime definition of pride, just is larger than life. And sometimes this is a good way to act, to almost placebo yourself into, yes,
exactly.
I can do more.
It is something that definitely helped me with the injuries. Definitely. There was that placebo effect of it was just like, my pride will not bring me down. Not one bit. Pride isn't a bad thing. You need it to be able to continue your story, because if you don't have pride in your story, like what you've built until now, there's always going to be something missing in the infrastructure. You know what I mean? There's going to be a little tiny crack in there that can develop over time.
You lose all pride, you lose all drive.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z is one of my top animes of all time, so
it's just raw emotion, man. Sure. It's a beautiful way of experiencing raw emotion.
Where can people find out more about your work, brother, if they want to follow you?
Instagram, Mike the Saiyan. It's Mike the Saiyan, the same thing on YouTube as well.
Perfect. Thanks for your time, man.
All right. Sorry if I dragged on a little bit.